from attorney William J. Wolf.
Good afternoon. My name is William J. Wolf, your host for the noon hour, Phoenix time at noon every Sunday here on 960 The Patriot. And I say Phoenix time because this show is available worldwide on the internet at kknt960.com. So tell your friends out of state about this internet access. The toll-free number in the United States is 888-960-9696. Today I have author Devin Sper in studio to discuss his new book, The Future of Israel. But first, in my Random Thoughts segment, I have scientist Dr. Pierre Golubinoff on the phone from Switzerland to discuss the Nobel Prize recently awarded to 2 Israeli and 1 American scientists. Dr. Golubinoff, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's great to listen to your show even in Switzerland.
Thank you very much. I guess I should say good evening to you. What time is it for you?
It's 9 o'clock in the evening.
Okay, Dr. Golubinoff. Briefly, can you give us an idea of what your background is? You're a microbiologist, is that correct?
Well, I am a biochemist, microbiologist, and I was a professor at the Hebrew University. And 3 years ago, I moved to Switzerland to quieter pastures. However, many of my colleagues among my colleagues there, of course, were the 2 Nobel Prize winners. And I kind of thought that it was a very important event that occurred almost unnoticed in the turmoil of the Middle East.
Okay, so we have 2 out of the 3 are being Israeli scientists. What exactly was the breakthrough that earned them a share of the Nobel Prize?
Well, it's difficult to explain that in layman's terms, but in general, until their discovery, it was thought that the building blocks of the cells, of course, which are proteins, are kind of degrading themselves spontaneously, and they found that the proteins now in our cells are degraded in a very controlled way, and that's very important because it invests energy, and it is something that is not random. Now, the implications of how this specific degradation system works is that now we understand better how cells are controlling their life and death.
Okay, perhaps a better question, Dr. Golubinoff, would be, is this directed toward controlling human disease?
Well, it's much more than that. I mean, yes, indeed, human diseases can be controlled by the system. For example, this protein degradation system has to do with the development of the immune response to diseases such as bacterial or viruses. But also in cancer, this process is very important, and indeed, we can tilt the balance in favor of curing cancer by using certain drugs that affect this system. Okay. There are also other human diseases such as cystic fibrosis, and even, I would say, diseases such as prion diseases and Alzheimer's, which are directly controlled by this protein degradation system.
All right, Dr. Golubinoff, was this research done in Israel?
Completely. I mean, of course, Professor Erwin Rose was instrumental, but I would say that the initial discovery was done in Haifa at the Technion by Abraham Hershko and Aaron Chechanover. And they just then, in a series of sabbaticals, continued and developed this discovery in Philadelphia at the time with Erwin Rose. So I would say that the initial discovery and development was done in Israel, and maybe because of the financial constraints and other things, much of the research also was done in the States later on.
Well, how is it possible for such a small country as Israel to be at the forefront of so many different important developments?
Well, I think that it has to do with the fact that the first president of Israel was a scientist, Chaim Weizmann. And of course, Israel had a long history of excellence in scientific research. What is remarkable is that this was done on the background of continuous war, and of course, lots of constraints on finances. And it is remarkable that with little means, such high levels of science it has been achieved.
So, in other words, in Israel, there is a high level of science for medicine and other things. Now, let's talk a little bit more about funding. How is this type of research funded? Where does the money come from?
Yeah, well, I must say that indeed we are celebrating a success that of science, of Israeli science in the last 20 years, but I wouldn't be as optimistic of what is the situation now. I am not so sure that with the dwindling of the finances, such discoveries could be done today. The sources of science are coming mostly from outside. There is a strong program of collaboration with the United States, and also I must say that a good third of the Israeli science is financed by Germany, which has kind of transformed its emphasis from paying directly to Shoah people that now are less and less alive, and more now the German government invests in scientific programs, for example, with Israel.
Okay,
and
you mentioned that funding is going down. Well, what do you feel the future of scientific research in Israel is going to be if the trend continues as it is now?
Well, I mean, I think that there is financing not only of the science but also of the salaries. And this is a problem when you have people which have to make a living. For example, Aaron Chechanover is earning 12,000 shekels, which is about $2,000 a month, and with that you would have to live to make your whole family live. Now it's clear that when you have such bright minds, and they could be really taken by other institutions in the world, and there is a brain drain, and I must say that I am among them. You know. It was not possible for me to continue to live there. Among other reasons, it was financial constraints. So I think that it is symptomatic that the Israeli government made very little of this huge event of having two Nobel Prize winnings. I mean, it was barely acknowledged by the government.
One can only wonder what the future of science in Israel for the benefit of the world would be if Israel did not have to spend so much of its resources on security against Arab terrorism.
Definitely. I mean, it is clear that the sources are dwindling because of the security situation. But nevertheless, I think that it is extremely important to continue to guarantee the quality of the people. I would like to say bluntly, let's say that if you want to continue to be right in this whole issue of the Middle East conflict, we better be the better educated, those who are really making the world science advancing. And this is not by cutting in education that we will be able to keep to be, I would say, more powerful. On the good side, I am trying to express it in a positive way. You know, we want to be right and powerful, but because we are a little bit more knowledgeable, I would say, and maybe moral.
Okay, Dr. Glubinoff, can you please stay on the line? This is a live call-in show. We may get some questions. I'd ask you to stay on the line perhaps to the bottom of the hour in case there is a question directed directly to you. Actually, we do have a call coming in. Steve, can you hold on, please, through the next break? I want to introduce my guest in studio, Devin Sper. Devin Sper is the author of a new book, The Future of Israel, which just became available. And he was born and raised in New York. He emigrated to Israel at the age of 17, just prior to the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Mr. Sper lived in Israel for 10 years and has a degree in Jewish history from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He served 3 years in the Israel Defense Forces, primarily on the Golan Heights and in Lebanon. Since returning to the United States in 1982, Mr. Sper has spoken in defense of Israel to numerous audiences at synagogues, universities, civic organizations, and military institutions. He currently resides in the United States with his wife and 2 children and is the president of Sper Scientific Limited. I'd like to say good afternoon to you, Devin Sper.
Good afternoon, Bill. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, why don't we just start off by you telling how people can get a copy of your book, The Future of Israel?
Well, if they're local in Phoenix, they can get it at the Israel Connection, the Jewish Quarter, the Temple High Gift Shop, or if they're located somewhere else, they can go online and order it directly at www.sperltd.com. thefutureofisrael.net.
And I will also try to make the book available from my office, which is at 12th Street in Missouri, 1121 East Missouri. So perhaps if somebody would like to call and just pick it up in my office, they can do that. My office number is 602-279-1914. And as you can see, we do give a lot of information on the show, so perhaps it's a good idea to have pencil and paper throughout the show so that you can write these things down. Now, Devin, I have read your book cover to cover, and I find it fascinating. You go tremendously into the history of Israel and bring it all the way up to the present time. In your book, you seem to seek to define what you call the Jewish problem. How would you define that?
Well, the problem that I'm seeking to define and to solve in the future of Israel is specifically the problem of Jewish suffering. Now, we know that no people has a monopoly on suffering, but no other people has suffered more or over such a long time as have the Jews. Now, when this type of suffering has reoccurred consistently throughout our history for over 2,000 years, I think the time has come for us to ask ourselves why. And the problem, I believe, lies within us, and it's this. There is an element within Judaism, and has long been, that is obsessed with achieving a utopian moral purity. So much so that they refuse to sully their hands in the exercise of power which is necessary in the real world. Now, in my opinion, power is morally neutral. Power can be used for good or it can be used for evil. But many Jews have come to see power as evil in and of itself. And they wish to avoid the responsibilities that come with power and thereby remain morally pure. And this has left us time and again exposed to the mercies of our enemies.
So basically what you are saying is that for moral purity, Jews have been allowing their families and themselves to be sacrificed, in other words, to be killed.
Yes, and I stress a utopian moral purity because that means I'm all for moral purity, but utopian moral purity implies it's an unreachable and unrealistic moral purity. And that to maintain a state of absolute moral purity requires us to be absolutely powerless. Because once you have to engage in the exercise of power, you have to get your hands dirty.
And of course, Israel has exercised a certain amount of military power just for survival. We've talked on this show many times about the different wars, War of Independence, Six-Day War, Suez War, Yom Kippur War, and so on. So we're going to be getting to that in the show. We are coming up on break now. I will tell you that you're listening to Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. The show is available every Sunday at noon here on 960 The Patriot. This is a live call-in show. We do welcome your calls. Local number is 602-508-0960. Toll-free anywhere in the United States, 888-960-9696. I have Devin Sper in studio, and I have Professor Pierre Golubinoff on the phone from Switzerland welcoming your calls. Please stay with us. We'll be right back after the break.
in the sky, colors flying through.
960 The Patriot, KKNT.
Start this year right with a well-trusted accounting firm here in the Valley, Nelson & Robles PC, certified public accountants in the Valley since 1977. Nelson & Robles PC specialize in monthly accounting and tax preparations for all types of businesses, as well as individuals, trusts, and estates. If you have an accounting or tax need, then call Nelson & Robles PC today at 602-944-4242. That's Nelson & Robles PC, a trusted Valley accounting firm since 1977. 602-944-4242. Call today.
My friends, we all hope we'll never need the services of an attorney. Sometimes, of course, we don't have a choice. This is Dennis Prager here to tell you about William J. Wolf, attorney at law. William J. Wolf's practice is limited to injury and wrongful death claims, and although he's been in practice for over 31 years, he is not part of some huge impersonal law firm. To the contrary, when you call William J. Wolf, that's who you get. This means you also get very personal service. Over the years, William J. Wolf has successfully taken on many cases that other lawyers have turned down. Now you get the benefit of all that experience. There is absolutely no charge for initial consultation. As I said, we all hope we never need an injury attorney, but if you do, you want one with a lot of experience and one who will handle your case personally. That would be William J. Wolf, offices at 1121 East Missouri. Hours to fit your schedule. His number, 602-279-1914, 602-279-1914, outside the Phoenix metro area, 1-800-WOLF-LAW.
Buying a home or ready to sell? Grab the phone or pick up your cell. 602-980-7253. That's 602-980-SALE. Roland Scherer is a realtor with RE/MAX Excalibur and has lived here in the Valley of the Sun since 1957. His clients love his service. Just ask them. If you have questions about real estate, the Valley, or if you lived here a long time and just want to talk about the good old days, give Roland Scherer a call today. That's 602-980-7253. 602-980-SALE.
Whenever I pass the corner of 7th Street in Maryland, it's hard to resist making a quick stop at the Maryland Deli and Mini Mart. If I need a cup of coffee, it's always fresh. If I'm in the mood for iced tea, they serve the best China Mist. If I'm hungry, they make the freshest deli sandwiches around with boar's head meats, of course. For a quick treat, they've got Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Need gas? Use your Shell card or their ATM. Open 7 days a week from 5 to 11. The place is always clean and attractive. Seems like there are mini marts on every corner, but there's only one Maryland Deli and Mini Mart, corner of 7th Street in Maryland.
In my profession as an attorney, we get to know who the experts are in every related field. That's how I came to know Dr. Roger Baker. Dr. Baker is a board-certified chiropractic physician who handles accident injuries. His modern office provides every form of up-to-date healing and pain-relieving therapy, including acupuncture and pain control and digestion aid. Dr. Baker stays on top of what's new so that his patients have the latest advances in care. Take it from me, you're in the right hands with Dr. Roger Baker. Give Dr. Baker a call at 602-249-4508. That's Dr. Roger Baker, 602-249-4508.
Listen carefully. If I told you there is a way, 90, call now.
The Valley Station where your opinion counts. This is 960 The Patriot KKNT. You're locked into the Middle East Radio Forum, live on 960 The Patriot KKNT. To get in touch with our guest, call in live right now at 602-508-0960. That's 508-0960. Now, back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. I have author Devin Sper in studio to talk about his new book, The Future of Israel. I will remind you that we do have a toll-free number, 888-960-9696, and the show is available worldwide on the internet, kknt960.com. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is radioforum, radioforum, @AOL.com. Before we get back to Devin Sper, I always try to take my phone calls. Steve from Chicago has been waiting. Steve, you're on the air with Devin Sper.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Wolf. I enjoy your program very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
In this Friday's Washington Post, Charles Krauthammer had an editorial, the title of which was Kerry's False Plan for Peace. In essence, what Krauthammer suggested is that John Kerry's plan, so-called plan, for eliciting the cooperation of Europe in our dealing with Iraq and Afghanistan is to give in to the Europeans on our position on Israel. In other words, sell Israel down the river. I don't so much have a question as is this in the sense, is this correct? I mean, is Charles Krauthammer, do you understand John Kerry's plan, or?
In other words, what you're asking is Kerry's plan a sellout of Israel?
That's correct.
Okay, Devin, go ahead, please.
Thank you for the question, Steve. I don't know if Kerry's plan or if Kerry would consciously be interested in selling out Israel, and I doubt it. But I do agree with Krauthammer that the idea of coordinating our policy with Europe has to be worrisome for Israel because Europe is inherently anti-Israel. It has a long-standing bias. And when I hear that Kerry says that we must coordinate policy on the Middle East with Europe, as a supporter of Israel, I have to worry about that.
And also, I think Europe is going to get worse because it's becoming Islamized. I mean, it has a tremendous inflow of Muslims coming in, and as a matter of fact, I think French is approaching 10% Islam now. So you can see what a problem that's going to be. Steve, thanks very much for your call. It's a great question. Let's go quickly to Michael calling from Arcata, California. You're on the air with Devin Sper. Go ahead, please.
Devin, I'm enjoying the program. A question that I have is, what do you think the impact is going to be on the security situation of Israel in the much higher birth rate among Arabs than among Jews in the area?
Well, that's a very good question, Mike. That's a question that is often brought up, and it's one that we have to deal with. And in my book, The Future of Israel, I propose a coherent plan which is not simply a rearrangement of borders, but answers that question as well. And I have a I have a chapter on demographic expansion in which I propose an expansion of the Israeli population and explain a specific plan as to how we go about that. And so that problem does not worry me as it worries some, because I don't see this as a zero-sum game. For example, if we go back to the Arab birth rate in 1900 and the Jewish birth rate, and you would extrapolate that out, the Arabs would already have been a majority a long time ago. But there's Zionism, there's immigration, and there are many other factors, and this depends very much in part on what we do. We're not helpless here. We have the ability to change the dynamic and to create a different future for ourselves.
Can you be a little more specific, Devin, though? How do you expand the Jewish population?
Well, I'm talking about expanding the Jewish population worldwide. I believe that proselytism is inherent in Judaism. The Jews stopped proselytizing when Constantine made it a crime punishable by death in the Christian world, and when the Muslims took over the Middle East, they made it a crime. And we have internalized this, and if you'll ask most Jews today, they'll tell you that proselytism is not Jewish. But this certainly isn't true. Ruth, the ancestor of our King David, was a proselyte. 10% of the Roman Empire in ancient times had converted to Judaism. Judaism in ancient times was a dynamic, expanding religion, and I think that we need to be a dynamic, expanding people again. We need to stop seeing ourselves as a small people and always at the mercy of larger powers. We need to look at ourselves the way we did in the ancient world.
Now, Devin, are you aware that there are certain groups around the world who are claiming that they have Jewish roots? And obviously everybody's aware of the Ethiopians with the big airlift. There's also another group in Africa, I believe they're called the Lemba, who are also claiming Jewish roots, who perhaps want to immigrate to Israel. Do you have your hand on that type of situation?
Yes, I mentioned them in my book. That's part of my plan for demographic expansion, which includes all those groups who would like to join the Jews. You know, Ben-Gurion once said, there was a debate in Israel for years over who is a Jew legally, and Ben-Gurion said, as far as I'm concerned, anyone crazy enough to want to be a Jew is a Jew. I wouldn't go that far, but I would say that there are people who for centuries have wanted to be part of our people, and the rabbis will say that perhaps they're not Orthodox enough. I say let them convert.
Okay, thanks very much for your call, Michael. Okay, we were talking before the break about the definition of the Jewish problem, and if you could perhaps remind the audience what that is and where you believe this Jewish problem comes from.
Well, let me answer that by relating a story. And this story is a true story that comes from the book 1 Maccabees. At that time, the king of the Greeks who ruled Israel had made Judaism illegal. And there was a group of Jews who, in order to preserve their Judaism, went off into the wilderness and hid in a cave, and a large group. And they thought naively that they would be able to practice their Judaism there in that cave, and that the world would leave them alone. Now, of course, I don't have to tell you that the world did not leave them alone, just as it has never left us alone. And very soon an army of their enemies appeared before the mouth of the cave. Now, this posed a moral dilemma to those Jews in the cave, because as it happens, this was the Sabbath. And they made a decision that they would rather die there in innocence without violating the Sabbath than to violate it and defend themselves. And so they were all slaughtered. Now, these men were known in history as the pietists, and though all of them died in that cave, this pietist idea did not die. And in fact, it's continued to grow and eventually infected mainstream Judaism, especially our intellectual leadership. And it's this pietism, this unwillingness to deal with the real world on its own terms, that's led us from one tragedy to another.
Okay, Devin, let me stop you. We're going into our last minute before the break. I'd like to thank Professor Glubinoff for hanging on the phone. There were no questions, but I very much appreciate that you were willing to call in and share with us the situation, the wonderful situation with the Nobel Prize being awarded to two scientists from Israel. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. I have author Devin Sper in studio talking about his new book, The Future of Israel. I have read it cover to cover, and I highly recommend it. When we come back on the air after the break, he will again tell you how you can get your own copy. Please stay with us. We'll be back for your phone calls and further presentation after the break.
in the sky, colors flying through.
960 The Patriot, KKNT.
Estate planning. It's something you know in the back of your mind that you ought to be doing, but you just haven't gotten around to it yet, right? Well, maybe it's because you aren't quite sure what estate planning is really all about, or maybe you don't know where to turn for advice. Well, here's a suggestion. Make a call to Carmen Cercone of the Householder Group. His specialty is trust planning with an emphasis on estate preservation and tax reduction, and he's been doing it successfully in the Valley for over 24 years. Let Carmen Cercone put that kind of experience to work for you. Right now, he's offering a complimentary estate and retirement analysis just for calling him at 480-556-9600. That's 480-556-9600. For greater convenience, Mr. Cercone has offices at 7th Street in Missouri and Phoenix, and at 87th and in Via Ventura at the 101 in Scottsdale. Call for your complimentary appointment first thing tomorrow at 480-556-9600. Mr. Cercone is a registered representative offering securities through Sun America Securities, a member NASD, SIPC, and a wholly owned subsidiary broker-dealer of American International Group Incorporated. When you need help with your legal interests, contact Tacker & Associates, your full-service law firm, providing legal services statewide, including business formation, contracts, corporate legal matters, civil litigation, criminal matters, and traffic violations. You can contact us anytime at 602-385-3660. Remember, Tacker & Associates. We're here to protect your legal interest. Again, that's 602-385-3660. Tacker & Associates. For those of you who savor a taste of the Middle East, you'll be happy to know that all the flavors and all the savory aromas of traditional Israeli home cooking can now be found right here in the Valley at Sabuti Israeli Restaurant, corner of University and Hardy in Tempe. At Sabuti Israeli Restaurant, you'll enjoy all your favorites, including falafel, shawarma, hummus, kebabs, and chicken schnitzel. Sabuti also features a variety of vegetarian specials. Stop by for lunch or dinner and say hi to the owner, Danny, and sit down to an unforgettable dining experience you'll want to enjoy again and again. By the way, be sure to bring along family or friends because Sabuti Israeli Restaurant is something that's too good to keep to yourself. For lunch and dinner, Monday through Saturday, it's Sabuti Israeli Restaurant, southeast corner of University and Hardy in Tempe. Here's a number we hope you never need to use, 602-625-4785. Now, here's an address we hope you never need to visit, 5307 West Glendale Avenue. That phone number and address you just heard belong to Diamondback Collision Center. Nobody wants to have to repair a damaged vehicle, but it happens. It happens all the time here in Phoenix. So if it does to you, now you know where to take your vehicle. Diamondback Collision Center's 53rd Avenue in Glendale. They offer the customers free estimates, free towing, and warrant their paint jobs for as long as you own your vehicle, and they've been doing it all expertly for over 25 years. An accident is frustrating. Getting it fixed need not be. Write down that name and number, Diamondback Collision Centers, 623-915-4785. Good food, a convenient location, and friendly people. Of course, we're talking about Siegel's Kosher Market. If you've never been to Siegel's, you don't know what you're missing. Siegel's does their own baking right there on the premises. There's nothing frozen, and it's all kosher. Their lunch menu features favorites like corned beef. Try that with brown mustard and potato salad, and you'll be back for more. So why wait? The Siegel family invites you to visit Siegel's for lunch this coming week. 4818 North 7th Street, just south of Camelback. That's Siegel's Kosher Market.
Pane e Vino, a fine dining Italian restaurant located in the courtyard of La Mirada, 8900 East Pinnacle Peak Road in Scottsdale. The menu at Pane e Vino features an array of pasta, seafood, and meat dishes, including the house specialty Giappino, a large bowl of shrimp, clams, mussels, and halibut over linguine, all covered in a delicious red sauce. Open nightly at 5 for dinner. Pane of Vino offers a happy hour 7 nights a week. Pane of Vino, 8900 East Pinnacle Peak Road, Scottsdale.
Hello, this is Warren Risenden from Trades Unlimited, host of House Talk, heard every Saturday morning at 10 right here on 960 The Patriot. On House Talk, we take your calls on the air and answer your questions about home repairs and improvements. We talk about everything from patching drywall to adding additions. On House Talk, we also have many guests that are experts in their fields, like plumbers, electricians, and so on. So join us for House Talk this Saturday morning at 10 here on 960 The Patriot. Brought to you by Train and Trades Unlimited.
KKNT. You're locked into the Middle East radio form, live on 960 The Patriot KKNT. To get in touch with our guest, call in live right now at 602-508-0960. That's 508-0960. Now, back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf, and we're here for the noon hour every Sunday here on 960 The Patriot. In studio today, I have author Devin Sper talking about his brand new book, The Future of Israel. As I've said before, I have read it cover to cover, and I highly recommend it. Devin, again, can you please explain how the listeners can get a copy?
Well, local listeners in Phoenix can get it at the Israel Connection, the Jewish Quarter, the Temple High Gift Shop, and people can order it anywhere online directly at www.thefutureofisrael.net.
Okay, thanks, Devin. We were talking about the Pietists, a group that went to a cave to get away from everything and allowed themselves to be slaughtered. Is that philosophy still alive today?
I think that philosophy has always haunted the Jews from that day until this day, from the powerlessness of the Middle Ages up to Auschwitz, and it haunts us today. I can give you a current example would be, say, the wall in Israel. Israel is building a wall behind which
It's a security fence, but go ahead, I guess.
Well, you and I may disagree on this.
Go ahead.
I understand the reasons they're building it, and I want to say also that in absence of a real solution, it's better than nothing. But the mentality behind it is that if we build this wall and we withdraw behind it, the world will leave us alone. And more important than that, I've had many people who support it say to me, even if they don't leave us alone, they will then understand that we are the innocent victim.
Okay, well, that's kind of interesting, tragically interesting. I would much rather be alive than a dead, innocent, pure victim. In any event, I want to go to a call right now. We have a call, Jim from Tempe, wanting to discuss your book. Go ahead, Jim. You're on the air.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I read the book. It is excellent, and I highly recommend it to anybody concerned about Israel's place in the Middle East. My question is that in the book, you're claiming that Israel should have the power, and part of that would be, of course, to reclaim Judea and Samaria, which rightfully belongs to them.
And by the way, just so the listeners all understand, that's what's commonly referred to as the West Bank. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, so my question is, based on the current political situation of Europe and most of the world, what would be the reaction against Israel if Israel did what it had the right to do, and that is to reclaim the West Bank or Judea and Samaria?
Jim, can you define your question a little bit better? What do you mean by reclaim? There are Arabs living there. What are you suggesting should be done with the people who are living there now?
Well, that's part of my question. I don't know. I think part of the question is if it's reclaimed, what would happen to people that would be living there? And what would then the anti-Semitic and the anti-Israel European nations especially say or do about such a situation?
Okay, I'm going to appoint Devin as the Prime Minister of Israel. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for that appointment, Bill. Thank you for the question, Jim. And that's a very complex question, which will be hard to answer in a short time, but I'll try. The answer is that it's part of an organic whole. You cannot simply reclaim the West Bank in absence of a general expansion of Israel's power demographically, economically, militarily. It's part of a whole which, in my book, The Future of Israel, I lay out as a long-term plan. And I stress long-term. The problem of the Europeans and their reaction to it, it's almost like the boy who cried wolf. Since they have rejected every attempt of Israel to defend itself since its creation, I don't think we really need to worry about the sensibilities and the aspirations of people who are seeking to destroy us, or the criticisms of people who who for centuries kept us locked up in a ghetto and obviously are still motivated by anti-Semitism.
Okay, Devin, let me interrupt you. Jim, can you please stay on the line through the break, because I'd like to continue his answer and any follow-up questions you have.
Okay.
But we are coming up on break. My name is William Wolf. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum. My guest in studio is new author Devin Sper, who wrote an excellent book called The Future of Israel. Again, I highly recommend it. I have read it completely. This is a call-in show. We do welcome your calls, comments, questions, whatever you like. The local number is 602-508-0960. Toll-free anywhere in the United States is 888-960-9696. This is available on the internet worldwide at kknt960.com. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
in the sky, colors flying through.
960 The Patriot, KKNT.
Tucked away at the northeast corner of 7th Street in Missouri is that kosher-style New York Chicago deli you've been looking for ever since you moved to the Valley. Scott's Generations. It's just like home. From the complete breakfast, lunch, and dinner menu to the family pictures on the wall. Carryouts? Of course. Catering? Yes. Stop by, say hi to your hosts Scott and Jean, and pick up a dozen bagels or bialys and get a half dozen free. Your favorite deli from back east is as close as Scott's Generations, 5539 North 7th Street at Missouri. For free delivery, call 277-5662. Let me tell you about a sushi restaurant right here in Phoenix that you just have to visit. It's Sushi Q, featuring an amazing variety of fresh fish and seafood items, along with chicken and vegetarian specials. There's something for everyone at Sushi Q, including their new all-you-can-eat sushi and roll special, just $19.95 a person. Open for lunch and dinner, call Sushi Q for carryout at 602-943-2899. Sushi Q, well worth a visit to 8841 North 19th Avenue, just south of Dunlap. Sushi Q, where the food is always fresh.
Need a new windshield installed for your vehicle? Want the best price? You can get a new windshield installed for just $95 with Popeye's Auto Glass. Popeye's has lowest prices in the Valley guaranteed. Popeye's Auto Glass will match any competitor's price, plus give you an additional 15% off. They offer same-day 24-hour service plus free mobile service. Call 602-388-6680. 602-388-6680. Get a free estimate today. Call 602-388-6680 and experience the price advantage of Popeye's Auto Glass.
In my profession as an attorney, we get to know who the experts are in every related field. That's how I came to know Dr. Roger Baker. Dr. Baker is a board-certified chiropractic physician who handles accident injuries. His modern office provides every form of up-to-date healing and pain-relieving therapy, including acupuncture for pain control and digestion aid. Dr. Baker stays on top of what's new so that his patients have the latest advances in care. Take it from me, you're in the right hands with Dr. Roger Baker. Give Dr. Baker a call at 602-249-4508. That's Dr. Roger Baker, 602-249-4508.
Whenever I pass the corner of 7th Street in Maryland, it's hard to resist making a quick stop at the Maryland Deli and Mini Mart. If I need a cup of coffee, it's always fresh. There's only one Maryland Deli and Mini Mart, corner of 7th Street in Maryland.
Show your allegiance to the red, white, and blue. 960 The Patriot, KKNT. You're locked into the Middle East Radio Forum, live on 960 The Patriot, KKNT. To get in touch with our guest, call in live right now at 602-508-0960. That's 508-0960. Now, back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. In studio today, my guest is Devin Sper, author of a new book, The Future of Israel. And Devin, we've been talking with Jim calling in from Tempe. He was asking about taking over what's commonly called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. And I think you were talking about this as being part of the whole plan that you believe Israel needs to follow. Is that correct?
Yes, I think things would look very different if Israel was a country of 15 million with an economy of $2 trillion, and that these things are achievable, and that I lay out a plan in the book which, while some may not like where I'm going, nobody who has read it thinks that it is unachievable, not doable, and that it would not in fact lead to the ultimate end of Jewish suffering. But to answer your question more specifically, personally, I believe that the Jordan River is the only defensible border and the natural border of the land of Israel, and that it's an integral whole. By the way, the Palestine Liberation Organization agrees with me on that. There is really no practical way to divide the land of Israel. But having said that, let me say this. This decision is up to the Israeli people. It's up to them because they're the ones who have to pay the price to defend whatever border they choose. And you, Jim, and Bill, and I, and everyone who loves Israel out there, I know will defend their choice. What I advocate in my book is that they need to make that choice.
Okay, Devin, I think we still need to go into the situation with the people that are already living there, the non-Israelis. Obviously, there are Jewish towns and villages on what's called the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. There are perhaps 1 million, 2 million Arabs in this area. Can you give us some specifics about what can be done with these people?
Yes, I think, as I said, the first step is that Israel must declare her border, because if you haven't declared sovereignty over that area, you have no right to do anything with those people. But once you declare sovereignty, you then have the right as a sovereign state to enforce the law. And I think that anyone who does not accept the sovereignty of the state of Israel in which borders she declares, ultimately, has no business there. Just as the United States expelled 5,000 Arabs the day after 9/11 who were not citizens, any country will expel and will not tolerate a group of people within it who are seeking to overthrow the government. The problem is Israel has not declared her sovereignty and therefore left open a vacuum which leads to the current chaos.
Okay, Jim, do you have any follow-up question for Devin?
No, I'm satisfied.
Okay, thanks very much for your call. Devin, I want to get into this pietism that you were talking about. You said it's still alive today, and obviously this goes into what you're talking about Israel leaving a vacuum by not declaring their borders. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, I think that's a good example of pietism. Israel has refused for 50 years to declare her borders. People talk about returning to the 48 borders, don't realize that Israel never declared the 48 borders. They were merely the armistice lines following the 1948 war. And in fact, no country, including the United States, has ever recognized them. And so there is no more legitimacy to those borders than to any other borders, although the Israeli left has made them into a holy grail. Now, if we have to ask why, as a state in 50 years, been unable to declare her borders. And the reason is that they are unwilling to accept the condemnation from anyone else in the world, including their enemies. And if the enemy claims that it's theirs, they want to leave it open for negotiation. There comes a time when there's no goodwill on the other side that we need to stop negotiating and we need to declare our borders.
Okay, Devin, in your book, The Future of Israel, you write extensively about what you believe to be an alternative, more realistic path within Judaism, which you call the fourth philosophy. Can you tell our listeners about that, please?
Okay, well, let's go back for a moment to that story about the pietists, because on the very next page in 1 Maccabees, there's another story, and it talks about another group of men who at the same time and for the same reasons went down to the desert to flee the persecution of Judaism. Now, when they heard about what had happened to the pietists in that cave and how they were all massacred, they had a meeting and they said to each other, if we do as they do, we're going to be wiped off the face of the earth. And so they decided that instead of allowing themselves to be slaughtered, they would fight on the Sabbath, and they did. And they won. And it took them 26 years, but they threw off their oppressors and they saved Judaism. And these men became known as the Maccabees. And this represents a very different Judaism than the pietism. This is another form of Judaism that has also existed throughout Jewish history. It's a dynamic Judaism that's unafraid to meet and challenge the world on its own terms. This is, in fact, the mainstream Judaism. This is the Judaism, for example, of the Bible. In the Bible, we have the book of Esther, and it tells us about a group of Jews in Persia who were also persecuted, and a plot was hatched against them by a man named Haman who sought to destroy them. Now, we don't find them negotiating with Haman. We don't find them appeasing him. We don't find them wringing their hands about what to do. And we don't find them sacrificing their lives for the sake of moral purity. What they do in the book of Esther is the Jews go after their enemies. They hunt them down. They kill 80,000 of them. They take the leader Haman and his 10 sons and impale them on pikes. Now, that's a different Judaism. This is the Judaism of Shimon Bar Kokhba, the leader of the Second Great Revolt. This is the Judaism of some of our greatest sages, like Rabbi Akiba, who supported Bar Kokhba, and his student Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer. This is the self-confident Judaism of Judah Halevi's Kuzari. This is the bold Judaism of Nachmanides, who stood in front of the king of Spain and spoke truth to power. And this is the Judaism of the Zealots, of the Zionists, of the Rav Kook, and of David Ben-Gurion. And this is the form of Judaism which, following the ancient historian Josephus, I call the fourth philosophy.
Okay, who is holding sway now in Israel?
Intellectually, for centuries, our intellectual leadership has been pietist. The vast majority of the Jewish people in Israel and the Jewish people historically have never bought into this. And they've shown that by their steadfastness and their adherence to their tradition despite all odds. But their efforts have been compromised, as have the sacrifices of the Israeli people, time and again, by their leadership. It isn't long before the blood is dried on the last Israeli victory that their leaders are willing to negotiate it away. And this is not different than the sacrifices we've made all throughout history since the destruction of our state.
So, just so for clarity, are you saying that the pietists or the zealots are holding power?
The pietists are holding power, but the people have never bought into it, and I'll prove that to you. Every election in the last 5 elections, the pietists have been thrown out of power. Perez, Netanyahu, after he betrayed the ideals that he ran for, Barak, every time that the people are given a choice, they choose correctly, and every time the people who come into power readopt the pietist idea.
Well, if the people are not of that ilk, why do the pietists keep getting you back into power?
It's an excellent question, and the reason is that nobody has proposed an alternative point of view. I'll give you a concrete example. The peace process was a harebrained idea, to be frank, from the beginning. It proposed that we give land for peace when it's obvious that the hatred of Israel's enemies has nothing to do with the size of Israel or the location of her borders, but to her existence in principle. But the Israeli right was not offering any alternative. They simply said what they don't want. What I'm offering in my book, The Future of Israel, is a coherent alternative idea for the future of Israel that's different than peace process. And this is what the Israeli right and people who do not buy into the pietist idea have been lacking.
Okay, Devin, you've got about 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The next question would be, all right, if we accept that this is the way that we have to go, and we shake off this pietism, what happens? And I say it's not hard to find the answer to that. We need only look back to what Israel was like before the Oslo agreements in 1993. Israel, from 1948 to 1990, went from strength to strength. She went from 600,000 inhabitants to 6 million. She increased her economy to $100 billion. She achieved a standard of living for her people which is equal to that in Europe. And she did all this without permission from anybody, without Arafat, without a Palestinian state, without peace process, and without a road map. And we need to go back to where we left off before we started marching back into the ghetto at Oslo, and we need to resume that trajectory. We need to take Israel further from where she is today, which is already the status of a regional power, and we need to take her to the next step, which is the status of a major power.
Tell us what Israel should do.
Once she reaches that point.
Well, from this point to where she needs to go.
How does she get there?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, she needs to do 3 things. She needs to, A, as I said before, declare her borders. B, she needs to create a buffer zone around those borders. And she can do that with a carrot and stick approach. In the case of a state like Jordan, which makes peace, she has a buffer zone. In Sinai, she already has a buffer zone because she conditioned the giving back of Sinai to Egypt based on demilitarization of Sinai. In a case like Syria, where you have an unrepentant enemy, she creates a buffer zone inside that country's territory. In other words, she unilaterally declares a demilitarized zone within Syria, and any entrance of military forces into that zone is casus belli. And now that you've secured the borders of Israel, you rid yourself of any populations within who do not accept the sovereignty of the state. Now, let me make that clear. Anyone who does accept the sovereignty of the state has full democratic rights and is left in peace. But no state can tolerate a hostile population operating as a fifth column within its borders, rocketing its cities. The United States wouldn't tolerate a group operating in Texas which sought to break away from the United States and was shelling Houston. And Israel needs to operate by the same rules as every other country. And this is an important principle that I want to stress. We have to stop holding ourselves to this morally pure standard, and as such, we need to stop allowing other people to hold us to a double standard.
Well, I would argue that doing what you suggest perhaps could be considered to be morally pure, because that's how you are protecting your citizens. I don't think it's morally pure to hold your neck out and say, go ahead and cut, which is similar to what I think happens in a lot of ways with Israel not taking some of the things that you have said are necessary. So in terms of moral purity, I'm just not sure that what you say is not morally pure. Go ahead, Devin.
I just want to agree with you very strongly. When I keep saying utopian moral purity, what I mean is that's not a realistic moral purity. I think that a policy of allowing Jews to be slaughtered is immoral, and it's even more immoral when we're talking about a country that has the power to do something about it. We're not saying that we are like the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto or the pietists in the cave that were facing overwhelming force. In this case, Israel versus her Palestinian Arab enemies has the power. So what good does it do that Israel has 3 nuclear submarines when Jewish children are slaughtered in pizza places and on their school buses? If we don't exercise the power to protect our people that we have, that is immoral.
Okay, Devin, do you feel there's any alternative to what you propose as your plan?
Well, I think the alternative has been adequately tried and failed. I think the policy of appeasement at Oslo has had a good run of 10 years, and I think that any honest person knows that it's an absolute failure. And I, for one, am tired of Jewish suffering, and I think it's time we went in another direction.
Okay, how do you believe that Israel's friends in the world, or perhaps friend, meaning the United States, would react to Israel as a world power?
I think you'd agree, Bill, that a friend that would insist that Israel remain on a path of national suicide is not a real friend. And that true friends are going to welcome a strong, revitalized Israel that knows where she's going and is ready to state her case and defend her cause. And let me illustrate that. Israel's standing in the world was never higher than after her bold victory in 1967, and it's never been lower than since Barak offered to give away the fruits of that victory.
Devin, we have enough material here for another 2 or 3 shows. I would ask you if you can please return, perhaps in the next couple of months, to continue this discussion.
I'd be delighted.
Okay, thank you very much. You've been listening to Devin Sper here on Middle East Radio Forum. He is the author of a new book, The Future of Israel. And if you want to send me an email asking me how to get it, if you didn't catch it earlier, it's radioforum, RADIOFORUM, at AOL.com. I'll be happy to respond and let you know how you can get a copy of his book. Next week is the last Sunday before the election. So for Middle East Radio Forum, I have attorneys Farley Weiss and Guy Knoller on the show to debate the 2 candidates, Kerry and Bush, in terms of their relationship to Israel and to what their policies would be. I think that would be a very lively show. I hope that you can tune in and listen to us. The show is available to you every Sunday here on 960 AM The Patriot. Again, it's available on the internet anywhere in the world. Please tell your friends and relatives about us. That's at kknt960.com. And we do welcome your calls and your participation for every show. So that's Farley Weiss and Guy Knoller next week. I look forward to hearing from you next week. It should be a great show, and thanks for listening.
She will die. She's looking far away.
Pane Vino, a fine dining Italian restaurant located in the courtyard of La Mirada, 8900 East Pinnacle Peak Road in Scottsdale. The menu at